Rick is the boy almost everyone at school loves to make fun of, and Trey is his only real friend. Like every other day, they ride the school bus together, but this time the whole class is heading to an animal research lab. On the way there, Rick can't help but notice that he doesn't fit in with any of the groups at school. The only thing he's involved in is the school newspaper, and he's keeping a secret. He's in love with Jill, a girl who barely knows he exists and who's still dating Lance, the bully who never misses a chance to mess with him. When they arrive at the lab, the students are welcomed by Dr. Strom, who explains that every animal there has been genetically modified and now has unique abilities. Rick sees this as the perfect chance to talk to Jill, who's looking at a bird. He walks over and tells her he'd like to take her picture for the school newspaper. Right then, Dr. Strom warns everyone not to feed or photograph the animals because most of them are extremely sensitive to light. Rick ignores the warning and takes the picture anyway. The bird instantly bursts into flames. Panicking, he tries to put the fire out, but only makes things worse. In the process, he accidentally kicks the bird's body, sending it flying straight into Lance. Lance immediately loses his temper and goes after Rick. Jill tries to stop him, but she can't. Everything comes to a stop when Lou, the director of the lab and Lance's uncle, steps in. Lou recognizes Rick's last name and tells him he knew his parents. Rick explains that they died years ago and that he now lives with his aunt and uncle. While they're talking, Rick notices that Lou doesn't look well, but Lou insists he's perfectly fine. The moment his uncle walks away, Lance shoves Rick into an area covered in animal droppings. Trying to clean himself up, Rick finds a bottle filled with a clear liquid and uses it, thinking it's just water. At the same time, Dr. Strom explains that the lab is testing a powerful pheromone that affects animals' nervous systems and triggers a strong breeding instinct. Rick quickly realizes that the liquid he used was actually that very pheromone. Within seconds, animals from all kinds of species start chasing him. One of them is a genetically modified dragonfly that ends up biting him on the neck. That night, Rick's aunt and uncle get a call from the school telling them that he disappeared during the field trip. A little while later, Rick finally makes it home looking terrible, but they assume he's just going through puberty. As soon as he gets to his room, Albert tries to talk to him, but Rick can't handle the symptoms anymore and eventually passes out. Meanwhile, back at the lab, Lou gathers several employees to introduce his newest project. He reveals that he only has 1 hour left to live and that he's built a machine to extend his life. With Dr. Strom's help, Lou goes through the painful procedure. At first, it looks like the experiment has failed, and everyone thinks he's going to die anyway. But then Lou grabs one of the employees by the arm and, with a single touch, drains all of his life force. His strength comes back instantly, and he starts draining the life out of everyone else in the room. The next morning, Rick wakes up feeling completely fine. All of his symptoms are gone, including the mark from the dragonfly bite. Worried about what happened, he looks online to see if a dragonfly bite can spread any diseases. While filling out an online questionnaire, he gets a message from a stranger on social media. The person claims to know exactly what's happening to him and says they'll be meeting very soon. Later that morning, the students get a visit from the famous physicist Stephen Hawking. Everyone is excited to walk around the science fair and check out the different exhibits. Rick notices that Jill is there too and tries to build up the courage to finally talk to her. Before he gets the chance to talk to Jill, Rick walks over to a drinking fountain. The moment he touches it, his hands get stuck. As he struggles to pull them free, he accidentally rips the fountain right out of the ground and sends it flying straight into Lance. Annoyed, Lance starts beating Rick up while the rest of the students gather around to watch. To everyone's surprise, Rick dodges every punch with incredible reflexes. But after losing focus for a split second, Lance ends up giving him a brutal beating. The entire science fair quickly falls into chaos. Stephen Hawking falls into a container filled with hunter bees, the animals escape, and the whole school erupts in panic. Later, Rick heads home feeling completely defeated. As he walks through an alley, he decides to test the strange abilities he's developed. He places his hands on a wall and discovers he can climb it with incredible ease. Just then, an elderly woman starts crossing the street as a truck comes speeding toward her with no way to stop. Rick reacts instantly, saves her, and brings the truck to a complete stop using nothing but his body. The people watching cheer him on, calling him a real superhero. But Rick soon realizes that while pushing the woman out of the truck's path, he accidentally launched her straight into a wood chipper. When he gets home, Rick tells his uncle Albert and Trey that he thinks the dragonfly bite gave him superpowers. To test his theory, Albert fires a nail at him. Rick catches it effortlessly with one hand and says it was incredibly easy. Albert then fires another nail at Trey. Since Rick doesn't even try to stop it, Trey faints from pure fear, convincing Albert that his nephew really does have superhuman abilities. Rick also explains that during the fight, he could clearly see every one of Lance's punches before they landed. To test that, Albert suddenly swings at Trey without warning, confirming that Rick can sense movements long before they happen. That night, Rick goes out into his backyard and starts thinking about everything that's happened. As he holds the ring his father gave him before he died, he remembers the night he lost his parents. They were leaving a concert when they walked through an alley filled with homeless people. Rick told his father that he wanted to become someone who could change people's lives. Moments later, a mugger stopped them and demanded all of their valuables. Rick's father tried to fight him off and initially managed to keep the gun from firing. But Rick stepped in and, without meaning to, caused the robber to shoot both of his parents several times before running away. As he lay dying, Rick's father handed him the family ring and told him that the entire family fortune would one day belong to him. As his final wish, he also told Rick to sell all of the family's Google stock because he believed the company had no future. Thanks to that advice, Rick ended up losing the entire family fortune. Back in the present, Rick runs into Jill, who turns out to be his neighbor. The two of them talk about the problems they're dealing with. Jill admits that she doesn't want to go to college and that her real dream is to become a dancer. Just then, Lance pulls up to pick her up. Before leaving, Jill looks at Rick and tells him that maybe someday they could go for a ride together. The next morning, Rick starts browsing cars online, hoping to buy one, but he quickly realizes he doesn't have nearly enough money. Just then, he receives a video from the same mysterious user who promised to help him. Unfortunately, the file is corrupted, and Rick can't make any sense of it. Later that morning, Rick goes to the bank with his aunt and uncle to apply for a loan. But since he doesn't have a job, the bank manager turns him down. Rick keeps trying to convince him, but the manager simply tells him, "That's not my problem," and asks him to leave. Right then, a robber storms into the bank and steals all the money. When he tries to escape, he can't get the front door open, so Rick, without even thinking, helps him get out. The bank manager confronts Rick over what he just did, but Rick simply replies with the same words he heard earlier, "Not my problem." A few seconds later, several gunshots ring out and people start running down the street. Thinking something terrible has happened, Rick rushes over, only to find out it was just part of a performance featuring a dancing monkey. But moments later, he finds his Uncle Albert lying on the ground with a gunshot wound. Before passing out, Albert tells Rick to use his powers to help people because with great power comes great responsibility. Meanwhile, back at the lab, Lou starts suffering the side effects of his experiment. His body quickly weakens again, leaving him on the verge of death. When one of the employees comes in to help, Lou drains all of his life force and immediately regains his strength. At the hospital, Jill comes to visit Rick. Soon after, a doctor tells him that because of the severity of Albert's injuries, he probably won't survive. Heartbroken, Rick heads home, but on the way he runs into a mysterious man named Xavier. Rick realizes Xavier is the same stranger who contacted him online a few days earlier. Xavier explains that he can read minds and offers to help Rick become a real superhero. He then takes Rick to his school for mutants, where he meets several students with special abilities. Some have pretty simple powers, like being able to stretch their bodies, while others have much more dangerous abilities, including one student who can kill someone with a single sneeze. As they walk through the school, Rick also runs into famous heroes like Wolverine, Storm, and the Invisible Woman. Later, he meets Mrs. Xavier, who explains that the first step to becoming a superhero is creating your own costume. Rick goes back home and spends several days working on it until it's finally finished. When Trey comes over to visit, he's amazed by how it turned out. However, Rick quickly realizes he forgot to add breathing holes and can barely see through the mask. After fixing those problems, he climbs to the rooftop of a building to keep an eye on the city. There, he runs into the Human Torch, who decides to show off his powers by covering himself in flames. But the heat quickly becomes too much, even for him, and he starts panicking. Rick tries to help by using a fire extinguisher, but none of his attempts work. He then decides to test the powers he got from the dragonfly bite. He jumps off the building, convinced he'll be able to fly, but immediately realizes that's not the case. As the days go by, everyone starts recognizing the city's newest hero. Dragonfly rescues people in danger, stops criminals, and little by little makes the city a safer place. Meanwhile, Dr. Strom explains to Lou that if he wants to stay alive, he'll have to absorb the life force of at least one person every single day. Otherwise, he'll die very soon. After hearing that, Lou comes up with a new plan that he's about to put into action across the city. Rick also realizes that his superhero identity has become incredibly popular. While reading the newspaper, he notices they're paying for photos of Dragonfly, so he decides to take advantage of the opportunity and make some money. When he arrives at the newspaper office, he's greeted by an extremely aggressive man. A moment later, he realizes the man is actually a patient who escaped from the psychiatric hospital. Shortly afterward, the real newspaper editor shows up and clears up the confusion. Since the newspaper shares the building with a psychiatric hospital, Rick first mistakes the real editor for one of the patients. After clearing up the misunderstanding, Rick shows him a few pictures of Dragonfly. However, the editor explains that he'll only pay for photos of the hero while he's actually in action. Just then, one of the reporters announces that the police have surrounded the city's university. Rick wastes no time and rushes to the scene. There, the police are facing a new villain calling himself Hourglass, whose goal is to absorb the life force of as many people as possible. Dragonfly arrives just in time and opens the fight with a powerful punch. The two of them launch into an intense hand-to-hand fight, but after a powerful clash, they both end up dazed. During the battle, Hourglass pulls out a pair of titanium swords and attacks the hero. Rick tries to dodge them, but ends up getting hit by every single strike. Hourglass declares that he won't let anyone ruin his plans. He smashes through a wall to clear a path and manages to escape. Rick heads back home, where Trey helps patch up his wounds. While recovering, he watches Jill through his bedroom window. A little later, his aunt gives him an important piece of advice. Dragonfly must never reveal his true identity because any villain would go after the people he loves most. That night, Rick goes to watch Trey's performance, but he arrives too late. Soon after, Jill asks him if he's hiding something from her. Rick hesitates for a moment, but eventually says no. As Jill walks home, several thugs corner her in an alley. Just when it seems like she has no way out, Dragonfly shows up and takes them all down within seconds. Grateful for being rescued, Jill kisses the hero before he continues patrolling the city over the following days. Sometime later, Jill helps Rick's aunt prepare a special dinner. She and Lance arrive at the house, and not long after, Lou shows up as well, having been invited. Rick's aunt notices that her nephew still hasn't come downstairs and assumes he's probably still in his room. Lou offers to go get him. At that exact moment, Rick climbs into his bedroom through the window. Hearing someone coming, he desperately starts looking for places to hide. Lou searches the entire room, but every time he's about to find Rick, Rick manages to hide somewhere else just in time. Eventually, Lou gives up and heads back to the kitchen. Just then, Rick walks in through the front door, apologizes for being late, and sits down for dinner with everyone else. During dinner, Lou notices several cuts on Rick's arm. Rick says he got hurt while working. His aunt explains that he's now working as Dragonfly's photographer. The moment Lou hears that, he starts putting all the pieces together and begins to suspect that Rick is actually Dragonfly. A little later, Lou says he has to leave because an emergency has come up. After dinner, Rick tells Jill that he personally knows Dragonfly. Jill admits that she's in love with the hero and hopes she'll get to meet him someday. Encouraged by the conversation, Rick is just about to confess his feelings. But the moment is completely ruined when his aunt, who had been asleep, lets out an enormous fart so powerful that it actually shakes the entire house. At that moment, Hourglass appears and discovers Dragonfly's true identity. Rick tries to stop him, but can't. The villain tells Rick that he's not going to kill him. Not yet. Instead, he's going to take away the person he loves most. Hourglass places a hand on Rick's aunt and drains all of her life force in an instant. Rick rushes her to the hospital, where the doctors sadly inform him that she didn't make it. To his surprise, Albert has finally woken up from his coma and has fully recovered. But when Albert learns that his wife has died, he's completely devastated. A few days later, during the funeral, he can't bear seeing her lying in the casket. Overcome with grief, he throws himself onto it. The only problem is that it's the wrong casket. After realizing his mistake, he backs away and finally finds his wife's coffin. Filled with emotion, he runs toward her once again, but the casket tips over, sending the body into a nearby bonfire, turning the entire funeral into complete chaos. Once everything is over, Jill tries to talk to Rick. However, he tells her that he doesn't love her and that it's better if they go their separate ways because he doesn't want her to suffer the same fate as his aunt. Several days pass, and Rick is still devastated by his aunt's death and by pushing away the girl he's loved for so long. With the support of Albert and Trey, he finally finds the strength to become the city's hero once again and put an end to Hourglass once and for all. Rick knows the villain needs to gather a large crowd to absorb their life force, but he has no idea where he'll strike next. Just then, a TV news report announces a huge awards ceremony honoring people for their heroic acts. Since a massive crowd is expected to attend, Rick figures it could be Hourglass's next target. Albert drives Rick and Trey to the event. Once they arrive, they realize the place is packed with celebrities, including Lou himself. When the ceremony begins, Lou is the first person to receive an award, but he doesn't care about the recognition. He's only there to put his real plan into motion. While waiting for the right moment, Rick walks over to confront him and tries to find out if he knows who Hourglass really is. Without the slightest concern, Lou replies that maybe the villain is about to win the next award. Then he points toward the stage and says it could even be the Dalai Lama. The curtains immediately open, and everyone sees Dragonfly punching the Dalai Lama, throwing the entire event into absolute chaos. Within seconds, the ceremony turns into a massive brawl involving celebrities everywhere. In the middle of the confusion, Jill realizes that Lou is actually Hourglass after seeing him use the device that absorbs people's life force. Hourglass sets his plan in motion, and Dragonfly immediately goes after him. During the chase, Rick crashes through a broken wall and accidentally ends up inside a costume convention. Hourglass escapes in a flying machine. At the same time, part of the ceiling collapses, trapping Dragonfly underneath. Taking advantage of the situation, the villain throws a titanium blade at him. Jill jumps in front of Rick to protect him and is badly injured, allowing Hourglass to escape while Dragonfly stays behind to help her. At that moment, Stephen Hawking encourages Rick not to give up. He reminds him that even if he still can't fly, he has the determination to keep fighting. Inspired by those words, Rick goes after the villain once again. As Hourglass begins absorbing the life force of everyone around him to achieve immortality, Rick reaches the machine and shuts it down, restoring Jill and all the other victims back to normal. After saving them, the final battle begins. Hourglass throws a bomb at Rick, but the hero can't pull it off because it's stuck to his body. With no other choice, Rick charges straight at the villain and lets the bomb explode once they're close enough. The massive explosion finally defeats Hourglass. But then Jill falls from the top of the building. Rick immediately jumps after her, and the two meet in midair. That's when Jill notices that Dragonfly is wearing the same ring as Rick and finally realizes who he really is. Rick promises that he'll never leave her. Jill kisses him, and at that exact moment, Dragonfly wings finally sprout from Rick's back. Rick takes flight with Jill over the city, promising that he'll always protect humanity from evil. But just when everything seems to be over, a helicopter suddenly comes out of nowhere and crashes straight into them both. Don't forget to like and subscribe and let me know what you think about this movie.